Fundamentally, business is the exchange of goods and services. And that is what makes everything happen. This is another traditional conservative line in American experience. Business is what makes America happen. Business is what keeps an empire going, because the exchange of goods and services is what makes things going. And in the process, it's a way to expand our capabilities individually, collectively, and culturally. When we are designing and developing and exploring new and better ways of doing things, we do expand our capabilities. And it is a form of relationship. If I give you something and you give me something in return, that is a relationship. So if we go back to fundamentals, an economy is about the production and distribution of goods and services. Business is about these things. Then we start coming up with some different ideas. If we look at Adam Smith's invisible hand, it is relationships. You have to remember that when he was writing was the birth of the Industrial Revolution, just the beginning of the formation of factories. He was living in a culture that were villages. They were networks of villages. Even London was a network of villages. Every market town was a network of villages supporting villages. And it was a church-centered culture. Virtually every Protestant, virtually everyone, whether they were Protestant or Catholic, went to church. And virtually everyone in his world was Protestant. They were Anglican in England. They all went to church on a regular basis. And the teachings, the stories in the Bible were fundamental to how people thought. And ultimately, because it was the birth of the revolution and it was the birth of the American Revolution, the Industrial Revolution and American Revolution at the same time, it was a very hope-filled time. This is when he was writing about the world as he saw it, the world of the exchange, the production, the distribution of goods and services. So out of that understanding, I think what he was describing is what I'm calling community capitalism. And if we think about what happened in Russia in the 90s and what happened in China over that same period and into the last decade or two, what we have seen is the rise of community capitalism that has then been transformed into corporate capitalism. So let's look at community capitalism. It starts with a niche, a need, or a passion, always. And it grows to fulfill usually a combination of them. It's not much of a business if it's just fulfilling your passion. It has to have some kind of need or niche filled. It's always based on personal relationships. In a community, one of the things about Adam Smith is he didn't acknowledge the fact that if I live in a village and my wife is from the same village, or my husband is from the same village, or one down the street, all of my brothers and sisters grew up in this village. My aunts and uncles are probably in this village, except for the ones that are in another village down the road a little ways. And all of my wife's relatives are probably in her village, except for the ones that are in another village down the road a little ways. So I'm not going to give you a bad deal, because you're probably a relative, because you're from my village or from one of the villages nearby. You may be a relative, not of mine, of my wife or my husband, and in that case, I'm definitely not going to give you a bad deal. That is such an important part of what Adam Smith was experiencing, and it was so deeply buried in so much a part of life that he didn't even see it, didn't think to name it. We don't have it, so we can name it. It is real. We hardly have it all, except for those of us who are blessed to live in small towns. So we have this fundamental niche, need, or passion, and we're growing our business to fill those, and it's always based on personal relationships. Even if we're trying to get funding, the rule is always go to your family and friends first, your warm market, if you will, before you get external funding. Most external funders won't provide it unless you've gotten your local folks handled and taken as much as they're willing to give you. A business in a small community is part of a system network of mutual support. I've been watching it here on the coast, and I happen to know that there are 2 or 3 small businesses who provide a regular service that are actually being given stock in return for not ownership of the businesses that they're providing the services to as part of their pay. And that mutual support system is so there. When we, do business with folks that we know, we're likely to give them the best deal we can. When we do business with someone that we're going to see on a regular basis over and over again, we're going to be realizing that we're going to be supporting each other over the long haul. And therefore, our business has to include all of these qualities in a community capitalist model. A very different way of thinking from that corporate capitalist one that we saw a little while ago. Now, what has emerged in a corporate capital environment is the cooperative as a transitional stage, a transition that allows people to be in a community mode, even though they're having to function as if they were corporate capitalist structures. So I consider it a transitional stage. And that's co-ops, whether they are buyers co-ops or producers co-ops. Farmers co-ops was where they started. They're producers co-ops, but then they started providing resources to the farmers and became buyers, consumers co-ops. 1 billion people are members of cooperatives around the world. So a shift has happened. A lot of people are using the cooperative model as a transition so that they can function in the corporate capitalist economy and still maintain some of the qualities of community capitalism. And you can kind of see in this map over here of how many are scattered around the US. And of course, they're concentrated where the population is concentrated. The green ones are farmers cooperatives. The red ones are consumer cooperatives. Now, if we're talking about a community-based capitalism, we're actually talking about extending the concept of the sustainable farmstead. You've seen some of these images already. This is a model that is a working model. This is a cob building, timber and cob with straw, thatched roofs from the 1400s. This farm, it's called the Manor Farm. It's a visit, you can go visit it now. It's been a working farm since the 1400s. This is their pantry down here. I love it. With the current, whatever is most recently either been hunted or gathered from their own food crops, meat crops, what's been canned, what can sit in various forms of fermentation down here. All in their one pantry. And they also have something like, which would be their root cellar, where if you don't know it, this is in a basement, someone suggests this is how you could build it in your basement if you have a basement in your home. The typical soil temperature 2 feet below the surface of the earth is 59 degrees. So we're keeping things at a much cooler temperature just by putting them in the basement or in a root cellar. And there's a root cellar on the Manor Farm as well. So they're producing virtually all of their vegetables, they're producing virtually all of their grains, virtually all of their dairy products, and all of their meat products, and then they are keeping them, preserving however they can, without refrigeration. They don't need electric power to keep their food interesting. And then what is left over, they sell. That's what happens to the 10 to 20%. In community capitalism, this is how you sell it. In corporate capitalism, you take it to the grocery store.